Hi guys. Hey guys, it's Wednesday and it is snowing. Well, I guess not really snowing, but it's snowing for us, for where we live. This is snow. So, it is a cloudy, snowy, dreary Wednesday. We are on our way to PE. Who's with me? Alrighty guys, so it has been requested that my husband here comes on my little adoption chat and talk about his experiences and his feelings and his process, and I have a couple questions for him. So we are in the car and hopefully this will work, but you know, this is about the only time that we can chat together in peace without some little one running into our room or doing something. So we are going to discuss adoption together. Yay! So if you guys are new here, November is Adoption Awareness Month, and I have been spending this month just sharing my experiences and thoughts and processes about adoption. And so if you find adoption fascinating or want to know more things about it, then keep watching. If you've already been part of the conversation, welcome back. Grab your drink and join us on this car chat about adoption. Alrighty, honey. Are you gonna act right?
I guess. I'm gonna try. Is this supposed to be formal?
It's not formal. We just chat and talk. I'm gonna.
Can I tell jokes?
Really? Alright, so one of my videos I talked about our first adoption, and I shared how when I first came to you about adoption, you weren't on board and you were kind of like, let's wait, I need to think about it. And then eventually you were like, okay, yes, let's move forward with adoption. So one of the questions was, what made you change your mind about adopting in general?
Oh, that's a good question. And you know, I always say that's a good question when you don't know the answer. I think when I was a youngster, I wasn't around adoptive type situations. You know, I watched Annie. That was about as much knowledge as I've had in regards to adoption or fostering, etc., etc. So ultimately, when I met you, you brought the idea up of, you know, adopting and fostering, and I was open to the idea of, you know, I was torn between, you know, having honestly a biological family versus adding a child to our family, you know, that wasn't biological, and not just part of my mind thinking and mind frame at a young age. You know, of course, knowing that that was definitely not the way I should have been thinking at the time. Then just on top of the fact we had 2 children, we weren't in a financial position at the time, perhaps. Yeah, I think we were just trying to establish ourselves. And then, like I say, just, you know, having another kid. When we got married, we were talking about just having, I only wanted to really have 3 kids, but we negotiated on 6.
We did not negotiate.
We did
because
negotiate.
he was trying.
I was trying.
He was trying to get, you know, past base 3 and hit a home run. He was like, oh yeah, 6 kids sounds good. I would have 6 kids too.
I hit a home run before we even had this conversation.
Yeah, right. That's not true. But you know how they just sell you the dream, thinking that this ain't going nowhere, and then look up and now you're married with 11 kids.
But I don't think we talked about adopting.
Oh yeah,
for real.
We did.
It sounded good. It was in general. But we didn't say we were going to adopt. That part of our 6 children would be an adopted kid.
I see.
Anywho.
So basically what changed your mind was maturity, would you say? You just matured and financially we were in a better place?
Well, I think that ultimately at the end of the day, we'll talk about, you know, when the time is right. That, you know, I'm going to have a baby when the time is right, or I'm going to get married when the time is right, when I'm established. And ultimately, at the end of the day, there's no such thing as a perfect time. So at that point, I realized, you know, how passionate you were about adopting. And again, I wanted to be a support system. You know, I wasn't very familiar with adoption, but I was open to the ideal. Still fearful of what the challenges could be, because, you know, of course I've heard the negativity in adoption, you know, ranging from just kids not really, you know, you're not really knowing their situation and just being able to bond with the family and things like that. So ultimately, you know, at that time I felt like there was no better time than that time, you know, not understanding the situation wasn't perfect. And, you know, I really got a chance to look at the pros and the cons. The pros definitely outweighed the cons. So that's really what ultimately pushed me over the edge to change my mind and go and adopt.
So I think differently, just that goes back to that different upbringing, different exposures. Like I stated in my video, I was always exposed to adoption. It was talked about because so many people were adopted in my family already. So I just kind of grew up exposed to it and knowing people, whereas my husband didn't. So he had to go based off of what he heard or
I watched
society.
Annie. I watched Annie several times, so I was
not really
very knowledgeable of adoption.
Not having a true, clear understanding. So piggybacking off of that, the second time, why did you feel differently the second time? Because, you know, the second time I was the one that was like, maybe this is a sign, because we were having so much, it was so hard, so difficult, and you were like, we're not gonna quit, we're not gonna give up.
I think this is something that we've been planning for a long time. And, you know, one of the things that one of my roles, or any person's role as a spouse or loved one or significant other, is to be strong when your spouse is weak or thinking otherwise. And I know that ultimately this is something that we've talked about for quite some time. We got that phone call because I know who you are. You weren't gonna stop. You would be in a position where you would be frustrated, you know, disappointed in the situation, the outcome. But I really think that you would have been right back at it. And so for us to, you know, be in the situation of having to deal with that time lost, so we just kept going. Because again, I know what you really wanted. You know, I know what I wanted. We had some setbacks, but ultimately I don't feel like it was enough for us to close that chapter. Sometimes the universe wants to test you to see how bad you want something. Are you gonna really go for it and work hard and give it everything you got, or do you want everything just to be handed to you with a silver platter? And I think there's a case and scenario for everything, but I think this was one of those tests.
That was good. So philosophical. In general, adopting in general, what was the process like for you? Emotionally, what was the process like for you?
Well, I think emotionally, I think that, you know, first of all, it was two totally different situations in the adoption process. It was a private adoption. I really feel like I'm not saying that
adoption right. Situation or agency. I don't know which one
you're not saying it right either.
It was a totally different agency, adoption agency.
Yes.
Or an adoption situation.
Yeah. So you know, state versus you know, private, is just was totally a different experience for us. With our first adoption, you know, things went smoothly, everything was organized, everybody knew the situation, the scenario, everybody was prepped, and like almost like it was a rehearsal, and when it was time to execute, everything went flawlessly. You know, with the state, on our second adoption, you know, there was just a whole bunch of hiccups, a whole bunch of pushback, a whole bunch of, you know, things that caused things to be chaotic and unorganized. You know, we didn't know what the left hand and the right hand was doing, and, you know, what the situation or scenario would be looking like tomorrow.
So what was that like for you?
What was it like? I mean, it was just challenging. I think the key is that you just want to stay level-headed, even keel. Keep your head above the water. You know, don't let that, you know, things rattle you. I think it was a great experience for me because, of course, I learned so much in the adoption process, and it's been a humbling experience. You know, having to deal with a situation where there's a lot of emotions, and, you know, the kids are involved, you know, and so you have to really keep that in mind, and all your decisions have to be based truly on, you know, those young kids who are ultimately most affected by everything that's going on.
So emotionally you felt?
That didn't answer your question.
Maybe it did. Let me know if that did not answer the question.
I think it did answer the question.
So, of course, we adopted a son before we had a bio son. So what was it like for you having an adopted son and then having a bio son?
So the interesting part is I really, despite the fact that I had zero experience with the adoption process, it was really fearful on how I would handle or how I would be in bonding. As soon as our first adoption, joined our family, I mean, I think he just kind of cleaned. I think there was a small window of, you know, adjusting to this child that we didn't know much of anything about. But I think that it was a shorter time frame, you know, to bond with them. So by the time, you know, it came that, you know, I was having a biological son, ultimately it was just like having a second son, a second biological son, if we're trying to compare or just using that as an example. So, you know, technically it was a first bio son, but to me, in my heart, it was our third son, ultimately, at the end of the day, because we had an older son. So,
right,
you know, everybody was, you know, it was literally like we birthed him ourselves.
I think the process was slightly different too, because I already had a child, which I've stated before, which then meant that Lonnie had a child when we met. So I already had my son, so he stepped into that role as my son's father. So he essentially had already kind of adopted.
So maybe that plays a role. Maybe you know, because you know, our first
You're
son.
not in frame. Can you lean this way? People want to.
You know, we got to deal with that. You know, because we did have, you know, the son before we had a relationship or got married. Through your previous relationship. So I think that was more of an adjustment, you know, bringing him on more so. Once I kind of learned, you know, I made a lot of mistakes with him, but I did a lot of things right. So ultimately, you know, I was able to be more prepared and to be able to adapt a lot quicker. Just like with any parent with the first child, you would do a lot of things great, but you probably make more mistakes with that first child than any other child, and I was no different.
Right, I agree. they're your lesson child.
And it sucks because they're the ones that's usually jacked up in life. You don't want to believe that part.
They're your lesson kid. So one of the things that I forgot to share was when we were going to pick up our first adoption, when we were on our way to
where am I going?
Bring him home.
I am totally not going where I'm supposed to be going.
When we were on our way to bring him home, I mean, you could go this way and then go right. Technically. When we were on our way to go get him and bring him home, I remember the day very clearly. I was sitting on the bed. The house we lived in, our bed faced our bathroom, and Lonnie was getting ready, and I was sitting on the bed waiting for him to get ready, and he came out the bathroom and was like, I don't think we should do this.
Are you talking about our first adoption?
Yes.
Yeah.
And y'all, I just bawled tears because I'm like, are you serious right now? Are you serious right now? Like, we're literally on our way out the door to go pick him up, and this is what you're saying. What was that? That moment of...
That was a moment of fear. You know, that was a moment of, this thing is real, this is about to happen. Kind of like when you're getting married. And when it's time to actually hit the fan, you start thinking about pros and the cons, and you have a little fear, you get a little scared, especially since this was something, our first time, and something we've never done before. At that time, I was, you know, really, really concerned, and, you know, thinking about all the wrong things, maybe even talking to the wrong people. You know, I brought up that maybe we should just postpone it or not do it at all.
It was like, let's just wait, pump the brakes, hold on a second. And I think that goes back to my previous video when I was talking about people, because y'all, adoption, no, I feel like, and maybe if you adopted and you're watching this, comment below if you feel the same or if you feel differently. But I feel like it is just scary in general. I mean, it's just scary. Even if you don't have any biological children, even if you're adopting a baby, and in our case, we were adopting older kids. I think it's just scary. You just don't know. And if you don't have a support, if the people in your life aren't breathing life and support, but kind of you're already, in other words, you're already thinking about all the what ifs that could go wrong. Like, you've already thought these things through, husband and wife, or by yourself, or whoever, whatever. You've already thought about all the stuff that could go wrong. So you don't need a support system that is going to aid in you thinking about the stuff you've already thought about. You need people that are going to, you know, build you up and encourage you and speak life into this situation and not just feed your fears. So
that's correct. You got to have a support system of really getting feedback from the right people. I mean, this is the biggest decision you're going to make for the rest of your life. This decision affects your whole life. So it's not like buying a car that you hate, you know, because you could get rid of it, or you won't be paying a car note in 5-10 years or whatever. That car's not going to last forever. Or a house. You know, this is a decision that you can't turn around on or change your mind on. You know, there's no 30-day money-back guarantee.
Well, you got 6 months, kinda, sorta.
Yeah, but not really.
I'm just talking about another person's life here. You're talking about a living thing, a person, a human being. So you definitely you don't walk into these situations lightheartedly or just half thinking it. So what is, if any, questions that you have gotten that you felt were inappropriate questions, if any?
Do you know where babies come from?
No, I'm not talking about our having so many kids. I'm talking about around adoption, if any.
That were inappropriate?
Or just intrusive, or, you know.
I haven't really had any. You know, I think that the conversation that moms have with each other is totally different from the conversations dad have with each other. So, you know, men, we're really surfacey type conversation people. So even though you may be thinking something and want to ask something, you're not going to ask it. For women, the conversation I have with women, you know, they ask how old they are. You know. And then be like, are they twins? And I'm like, no, they're 3 days apart. And then they go on further to ask, how's that possible? And I tell them I had an affair with 2 women. And the babies were born 3 days apart. And you just sit back, open a bag of popcorn and look at the reactions, because it's very diversified in reactions.
And they believe you too, because they're like, yeah, that's about right. That is about right. Nobody questions if he's lying or telling the truth. They just go with it.
They just lie and walk away.
Like, that's about
never to
right.
hear from them again.
And can you believe his wife stayed? Anything else that you would like to add from your perspective as a male father, husband?
I think the key is just to be open-minded. You know, understand that, you know, what your purpose is on this earth. You know, how will it be defined? You know, what impact are we going to have while we're on this earth? And one of the biggest things you could do is to, you know, help a child in a situation, a tough situation. And that was my purpose. And, you know, those are some of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. You know, because ultimately, when all's said and done, you know, what impact did I have? You know, that's going to be my legacy. You know, I'm creating that. So hopefully, you know, there'll be stories about me for years and years to come.
You will be immortal.
Well.
Be like the king of the jungle.
Kinda.
Well, thank you for coming on to my channel and talking adoption.
It's been such a pleasure talking to all folks out there on YouTube and Twitter. Wait, is this Twitter? No,
No, this is not Twitter. He's old, y'all.
I'm not old.
So thank you guys for watching and enduring. And if there was a question that you have that we did not answer, feel free to leave it below, and we will definitely get around to answering it. Like I said, we'll be discussing adoption throughout the month of November. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. If you have experience with adoption, share that with us. Share your different experiences. Share the most inappropriate questions you've been asked and all of that good stuff. If you have not subscribed, hit that red button and join the non-traditional family. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much. You're the MVP. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.